look like? What would they have to change from what they're doing currently?
The first step is to identify, what it is that they're doing and what the impact of that is. It's not just a matter of saying, okay, we have to actually do everything differently. Maybe some things that you're doing right, but you have to be able to ask those questions and kind of see that, how are we doing? Is our production matching with what we want? What are the resources that we need, to meet that production? Are there ways we could be as productive or more using less energy, less resources, less nutrients? Right now there's this, at least, coming into this current era, the recipe, so to speak, for growing cannabis indoors has been kind of passed down through the generations, but really was grown out of an environment in which, folks were growing at a much smaller scale with less robust technology and not innovating a whole lot. And so there hasn't really been those questions or asked about if those assumptions are actually right. So I think, we're getting to that point now where folks are beginning to understand that there may be better ways, to produce this plant in ways that don't require quite as much energy.
Are you saying that, like the old tales that I've heard about this much light equals this many pounds when you home grow it, that's not true?
It may be true to some extent, but certainly not true when you expand the homegrown model, to 50,000 square foot facility. The math just doesn't work. And you're talking about a much different facility. I mean, it's an industrial process and it's highly complicated just in terms of the energy flows and the systems. And in fact, it's so complicated that, most professional engineers who might be tasked with designing a facility, you don't really understand, the nuances of how you make an indoor cultivation facility really work well. So we'll go in and kind of do that performance analysis. And 9 times out of 10, there are huge gaps between the way that they're designed and intended to operate and the way they actually are. So it's quite eye-opening to see how much room for improvement there is, at the vast majority of facilities out there.
So the tech of the future has to look very different to how we've been doing it, which is like a lot of the facilities that we have out here, at least to grow in large quantities, they're built in like converted mills or, big old buildings that sort of aren't really optimal for sustainability and eco-friendliness. So one place that I've seen actually is American down on the South Coast. I went to see their indoor grow facility, which is very eco-friendly and very aware of sort of a lot of issues that you have to take into account: the ventilation, the AC, the lighting, and whether you can use natural light to sort of bolster that indoor light. How the dehumidification works. There was just so much that went into it. So I have seen a version that's like an optimal, sustainable, eco-friendly way to grow cannabis. But there's also not a lot of people that have the money to set up these whole new places. All they have is the money to rent old mills. So how will they be able to convert how they're doing things on the regular power grid?
Yeah, that's a really important point. I think the lesson that folks can take away, from the experience of, trying to retrofit an old mill building, into a high performance facility is that it is possible. You're never probably going to get the same level of performance that you will if you have a purpose-built hybrid greenhouse that incorporates power from natural sunlight. If you're doing it simply and you have a limited budget, and frankly, almost even the big guys have limited budgets. They're massive companies in many cases, but still hanging on by a shoestring because it's a bear. To build a cultivation facility that works well, even just to make payroll every single week, it's tricky. These guys are in a pinch. So the way they can, I think, really perform well, even with limited resources, is just to step back and ask some hard questions, be willing to answer some hard questions.
I'm glad that you're on it. I'm glad that there's somebody working on this kind of stuff because the climate change issue is so big. And if we can make sure that at least the industry that we work in and that we care about is being as eco-friendly as possible and everything that we're consuming is being made in an eco-friendly way, then we're doing the most that we can for the climate.
Yeah, and it's tricky, right? Because on one hand, it's kind of politicized, right? Not everybody agrees with the vast majority of scientists that the climate is changing. And I think we all have a moral responsibility to do what we can to reduce our input. And certainly if you are a company that relies on a highly energy intensive industrial product, to make your profits, I think you doubly have a responsibility to do whatever you can to reduce that. And that the wild thing is that a lot of the changes that people can make, people being cultivators, are win-wins all around. So it's not a sacrifice to do a little bit of homework and evaluate, if your facility is operating efficiently, if there aren't, crazy systemic problems in your facility that are kind of requiring you to use, way more power than you need. And also it's that, consumers, I think more and more want to be able to do something positive. We live in this era now where there's so much bad news. It seems like the world is literally, crashing down upon us. And I think consumers, most humans, feel powerless in the face of all these things. And I think if the consumer can find a producer, a dispensary, a manufacturer of a product that they really like, and that by supporting, that company, they feel like they're doing something at least to improve the world, that can then go a long way. And I think that a lot of cannabis companies would do well to position themselves to be that provider for them, that is actually is giving back and is doing what they can, to make the world a little bit better place. And the dirty secret is that by embracing these sustainability principles, by trying to be a better operator, by being more a positive contributor to the society, and by just being a better run company, you're actually going to make more money.
And now for your latest U.S. cannabis news. Vermont's Republican Governor Phil Scott has pumped the brakes on a bill that would have legalized adult-use marijuana sales. After rejecting a few previous versions of the bill because of concerns over impaired driving and local taxes, Governor Scott has signaled this week that he is again considering vetoing the state's bill to legalize sales because he says it doesn't focus enough on social equity. Vermont legalized possession of up to an ounce and cultivation of 2 plants back in 2018, but residents are still waiting for a legal system for retail sales. I know we all got super excited that the U.S. House of Representatives had planned to hold a floor vote in late September to essentially legalize cannabis, but I bet not that many of us were super surprised when they called it off at the last minute. It looks like times are just too contentious to add free the weed to the list of things Congress wants to start discussing. Despite serious supply issues due to the wildfires, Oregon has seen yet another record-setting month of sales in September, when the state brought in 30% above its forecasted sales. Researchers are now pretty sure they can call the increase in pot sales a permanently adjusted behavior in response to COVID. And in Massachusetts, we could soon get dope delivered to our doors. The Cannabis Control Commission released its draft regulations last week for 2 different kinds of marijuana delivery licenses. One would essentially allow a company to be the Uber Eats of weed, picking up your prepaid order from a dispensary and delivering it to your door. And the other would allow a company to be like a driving door-to-door pot salesman who could stock up on wholesale products and store it all in a brick-and-mortar location. Both license types would only be available for social equity and economic empowerment applicants for the first 3 years. The Commission has a public comment period open over the next few weeks, and they're expected to vote on the draft regulations on October 20th. If you love us and you love what we do, you can hit subscribe wherever you're listening to us and follow us on social media. Just search for @DifferentLeaf, and I'm @Brit the British. Make sure you head over to differentleaf.com to get 4 issues of our delicious cannabis journal for $20. Thanks again to both of our guests this week, and thanks to our brilliant producer, Andrea Maraskin, and thanks to Homebody for the music.